After 3 years of pushing their anti-Canadian agenda, Calgary City Council has finally caught the memo that they're not well liked. So naturally, instead of making a concerted effort to genuinely listen to Calgarians' concerns, they've doubled down. Council voted this week to extend municipal voting rights to non-citizens. You might think that citizens are best inclined to determine the future of their cities and their country. After all, they have the most at stake, but woke ideologues increasingly disagree. It's not that they have any actual arguments, but rather they need to find a way to continue pushing through their unpopular and unaffordable agendas. And pandering to those who wouldn't otherwise be able to vote is pretty much all they have left. We might be tempted to complain about how politicians are ruining our cities and our countries, which they are, but might I suggest a different approach? We're about a year out from next year's municipal election cycle. It might be time to put your money where your mouth is and start organizing now to ensure better outcomes next year. I'm Rachel Emmanuel, and this is the Alberta Roundup.
Rachel Emmanuel brings the news each day on Alberta Roundup. She has her say.
Taking a look at our first story here, Calgary City Council this week voted to extend municipal voting rights to non-citizens. It will call on Alberta municipalities to explore allowing permanent residents to vote in municipal elections. The motion was put forward by Ward 8 Councillor Courtney Walcott. The councillors argued that many Calgary residents have lived in the city for years, but still can't have their voices heard come election time due to not being Canadian citizens. Walcott said, quote, "For a long time, people have always said the ability to vote is the incentive for citizenship. I would make the argument the ability to be engaged in community is the incentive for citizenship." The motion was carried by a 9-6 vote on Tuesday. Councillor Sonia Sharp, who voted against the motion, said her mom was a resident for 30 years and was very proud when she became a Canadian citizen. She said, quote, "Immigrants to this country who chose to come to this country for a reason. It's likely those immigrants actually have a better understanding of what it means to be a Canadian citizen than all of us." The motion will now go to the municipality of Penhold before it goes to Alberta municipalities. It's more than likely all of this could end up being a waste of time, as Alberta Municipal Affairs Minister Rick McIver said he won't be changing the rules to allow for non-citizens to vote. Taking a look at our next story here, the Alberta government is forging ahead with plans to study and likely build a rail network with commuter service around Alberta's 2 biggest cities. It would also include a high-speed link between Edmonton and Calgary. Transportation and Economic Corridors Minister Devin Dreeshen said this week that the province would undergo a feasibility study which would be completed in summer 2025 for rail connections between Calgary and Banff and Edmonton and Jasper. The study will cost $9 million and it will assess ridership demand as well as infrastructure needs. Requests for proposals would then be issued to private firms, a process that would take another 2 years. The government predicts Alberta's population, now nearly 4.9 million, will reach about 7.1 million people by 2051. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said commuters in Okotoks and Airdrie currently start their mornings with a stressful drive downtown, along with hundreds of other commuters. Here's what else she had to say.
And that doesn't need to be the case. We see the value in a commuter passenger line that connects folks in those communities to the Calgary airport and then on to the downtown core, in the case of Airdrie, for a more streamlined and relaxed commute. And we believe that a solution like that will also work in Edmonton and the entire capital region. That is the starting point. But we also want to open up direct access to our breathtaking and adventure-rich national parks.
Moving into our next story here, Calgarians are outraged over City Council's plan to do mass rezoning across the city. The little bungalow currently beside you could be torn down and 12 units could be built in its place. Hundreds of Calgarians have signed up to speak at City Council meetings and oppose this policy, which City Council seems hell-bent on pushing through. I had Councillor Dan McLean on my show this week to discuss. Here's a look at our conversation.
Sure. When we're talking about questioning the motives, I mean, another thing that's been raised is it almost seems like this could be a cash grab for city property taxes. If you think about it, if you live somewhere, you're one house, you're paying property taxes on that one property. That's taken down. That's created into 4 units. Maybe, Sweet, you said it could be up to 12. Now all those separate units are paying property taxes. The city is going to just be raking in the property taxes here. And we're talking about affordable housing. I mean, in most cases, this isn't affordable housing that's going up. Some of these townhouses that are being built are still going for $650,000. That's an insane amount of money for a townhouse. You don't even have a lot of land. So the city is just going to be raking it on the property taxes. Could that be a possible motivation for why they seem so bent on pushing forward this policy that it seems nobody wants?
Well, of course, the city's going to have additional taxes, and you're quite low on your 600,000 marks. A lot of these are a million plus. They'll take a $700,000 dollar bungalow. And again, this is where the speculation comes in. It's not just the city that's going to be raking in money, it's the inner city developers.
Moving on to the controversy of the week, following backlash from mayors and councillors as well as concerned residents in Alberta, the government is promising to make amendments to proposed Bill 20. Introduced in the legislature a week ago, the proposed bill would give the Alberta Cabinet the power to dismiss councillors and mayors in any municipality and to repeal or amend local bylaws. It would also allow for the creation of municipal political parties in Edmonton and Calgary as a pilot project. Responding to the bill, Calgary Mayor Jody Gondek says she was glad to see that it would require municipal candidates to undergo a criminal record check and that the government would be validating recall petitions instead of leaving it to the city. But she also had some concerns. Take a listen.
So right now, all it says is removal of a council member if it's in the public's interest, but public interest is not defined. I do know that Minister McIver has said something to the effect of public interest can be defined as public push or public request. I still don't know what that looks like. And in an age where recall exists, does it now mean that you can file a recall petition against someone and that becomes the grounds for Cabinet making a move towards removal? It's all unclear. It doesn't mesh together well, and public interest has to be defined very clearly for the public.
In a statement, Municipal Affairs Minister Rick McIver said he's planning to work with municipalities over their concerns and that amendments will be made. He said that Cabinet would only remove councillors as a last resort and that changing or repealing local bylaws would not be done lightly. In a statement, he said, quote, "The role of an elected official is one with tremendous responsibility and expectations. The Municipal Affairs Statute Amendment Act will strengthen the accountability of locally elected officials and councils while balancing the need to support local autonomy in areas of municipal oversight." Here's Alberta Premier Danielle Smith defending the proposed bill at an unrelated press conference earlier this week.
Well, I would say that we're in a bit of a different situation because the Constitution of our country recognizes two orders of government, the federal government and the provincial government, as well as recognizing Indigenous governments. But they have said that municipalities get their legislated authority from the provincial level of government. What we've observed is that the federal government is attempting to do a variety of workarounds to get their agenda passed, which may be in conflict to what it is that we want to do as a province. And so we are taking every mechanism that we need to make sure that we're asserting that the federal government has to talk with us when it comes to supporting municipalities or talking about policy change in municipalities. That's what also Bill 18 was about.
And finally, what we're watching in the weeks to come, a sweeping fire restriction has been put in place across Alberta as hot, dry weather leaves forests tinder dry. Emergency officials are urging extreme caution in the weeks ahead as persistent and severe drought pushes Alberta's wildfire danger to the extreme. On Wednesday, following a wildfire information update, the province introduced a fire restriction in the province's forest protection areas in an effort to manage the risk. With the exception of Calgary's forest protection zone, all outdoor fires are now prohibited on public lands, including backcountry and random camping areas. Wildfires have already prompted a handful of communities to temporarily evacuate and put hundreds more Albertans on notice to leave their homes at a moment's notice. And finally, moving into our weekly comment roundup, these comments all focus on last week's story talking about tabulators. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is now making a move to ban tabulators, as you know if you watched last week's episode. User Steve Elliott said, quote, "The people who cast the votes don't decide an election, the people who count the votes do, Joseph Stalin." I don't know if that's actually a real quote from Joseph Stalin, but it's certainly true. User VX Coco said, quote, "I never really cared using the electronic tabulators, but the fact is that if anyone has mistrust, then it needs to be addressed." I completely agree, and there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be able to hand count the ballots in Alberta. We can do it for the rest of Canada. Okay, everyone, that's all we have time for today. Please like this video and subscribe to True North so you don't miss any of our content. You can head over to donate.tnc.news to show some support for our work. Hope that you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. God bless.